Breaking, ICE and FBI expose Cartel airport boss, Detroit director turned hub for Cjng. Let's see how it happens. Let's go.
U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, DEA, HSI, ATF, and the Philadelphia Police Department have established an initiative, a violent crime initiative called
What happens when the heart of a U.S. airport stops beating for the nation and starts beating for a cartel? Before sunrise, Detroit stood silent under a steel gray sky. Frost clung to the runways like a thin layer of ash. Wind pushed through empty terminals as if the airport itself sensed something coming. Then the stillness shattered. Black SUVs surged through restricted gates. Tactical teams moved in tight formation. Their boots struck the floor with the precision of a military operation. And at the center of this storm was a single office, a single desk, a single woman, and a secret that would shake Michigan's security infrastructure to its core. The clock read 4:58 a.m. November 19th, 2025, the moment federal agents entered the private office of Airport Director Evelyn Markham, a figure trusted with safeguarding one of America's most vital transportation hubs. What they found made trust irrelevant. It made fear necessary. On her desk, 3 encrypted hard drives. Beside them, cash $72 million stacked in sealed bundles, the kind seen in cartel seizures, not in aviation administration. Nearby, dozens of unauthorized access badges, many traced directly to the Cjng, one of the most violent transnational criminal organizations on the continent. The discovery triggered immediate tactical escalation. According to federal briefings reviewed by multiple outlets including Reuters and BBC, the evidence pointed not to bribery or minor corruption, but to an internal occupation. Detroit Metro Airport, Michigan's most critical aviation link, had been quietly repurposed into a functioning cartel logistics hub. Markham wasn't simply compromised. She was operational. Her office resembled a command center more than a government workspace. As investigators widened the search, the scale of the breach grew. Markham, who oversaw personnel cargo approvals and security workflows, had allegedly approved 46 suspicious midnight flights over 4 years' flights with impossible weight manifests and routing data linked to Cjng corridors in Mexico. She inserted unqualified operatives into high-access roles. She embedded her own 19-year-old son Adrian into restricted logistics teams. She built a seamless trafficking pipeline that moved narcotics through Michigan as if guided by military planning. This was not a loophole, it was a blueprint. This was not a breach, it was a takeover. In a nation still navigating the balance between liberty and national security, the discovery sent shockwaves across Washington. President Trump, already vocal on cartel infiltration at U.S. borders, was briefed on the unfolding crisis. Intelligence analysts warned that Markham's network mirrored patterns seen in foreign covert operations. Precision redundancy, compartmentalization, the airport's collapse in integrity raised an uncomfortable question. How many other entry points could be compromised without detection? The human toll behind the numbers added a darker layer. The narcotics that moved through Detroit: methamphetamine, cocaine, fentanyl were the same substances driving record-breaking overdose deaths across the Midwest. Every shipment Markham enabled had a human cost. Every forged badge, every blackout camera window, every falsified report translated into lives damaged or lost far beyond the airport. Federal agents now face not just a crime, but a betrayal that challenged the foundational idea of public trust. If a state's top aviation official could turn an airport into a cartel superhighway, what did that mean for national security, for public faith, for America's standing as a global power capable of protecting its own infrastructure? As the operation to dismantle her empire began, one question hovered over Michigan like the winter fog. What other secrets waited behind closed doors in America's critical systems, and who else might already be inside? The deeper federal agents pushed into the airport's internal systems, the clearer the shape of Evelyn Markham's creation became. What began as a rogue official's misconduct quickly revealed itself as something engineered, disciplined, and disturbingly efficient. Detroit Metro Airport, once branded as Michigan's proudest transportation artery, had been quietly transformed into an industrial-scale narcotics gateway, a cartel-controlled superhighway running in and out of the United States. Markham's role was not symbolic, it was structural. Investigators discovered that over 4 years, she approved 46 covert midnight flights each, with nearly identical red flags, vague manifests, impossible weight totals, and routing codes linked directly to Cjng air corridors in Mexico. According to aviation analysts speaking to BBC and DW, these anomalies resembled smuggling signatures seen in Central America, not in a regulated U.S. airport. Each flight represented a corridor kept open deliberately and protected aggressively. Markham built her empire from 3 pillars: access, infiltration, and anonymity. She created access by manipulating airport databases, granting restricted area credentials to people with no employment records, no training, and in some cases, no verifiable identities at all. Many of these badges belong to CJNG operatives flown in under the guise of contractors. Some held clearance levels higher than long-serving airport staff. She ensured infiltration by strategically placing unqualified recruits into critical positions, loading supervisors, baggage handlers, security escorts, runway access teams. Federal audits would later identify 18 such operatives, each positioned in a way that allowed unhindered movement of pallets, containers, and cargo trucks. And woven into this network was her own son, 19-year-old Adrian Markham, placed on a night logistics team that provided full access to restricted bays. Surveillance footage revealed Adrian giving hand signals to CJNG drivers, coordinating pallet routes and relaying messages through encrypted phones. His involvement was operational, not incidental. Anonymity came from Markham's meticulous manipulation of surveillance systems. Camera blackout windows labeled as maintenance intervals aligned perfectly with CJNG arrival patterns. Maintenance reports she filed created blind spots at the exact moments narcotics containers were transferred to trucks. According to Guardian analysis, such systematic timing is typical of insider-enabled smuggling rings, not street-level trafficking. The pipeline that resulted was staggering. Federal tracing confirmed the movement of 2.9 tons of methamphetamine, 1.4 tons of cocaine, and 450,000 fentanyl pills through this clandestine route. Over $127 million washed through airline consulting accounts and fake nonprofit organizations in Detroit, Ann Arbor, Flint, and Grand Rapids. Every dollar moved was scrubbed to resemble legitimate aviation revenue. Every shipment was disguised as cargo from trusted vendors. CJNG operatives quietly began calling Detroit Metro Airport La Puerta del Norte, the North Gate. Markham stood at the center of that gate not as a bribed official, but as a strategic partner. Her operation was so seamless that she became an essential node in CJNG's northern expansion strategy. Federal analysts warned that the model she built, airport infiltration, badge manipulation, cargo concealment, could be replicated at other US airports if not addressed aggressively. But the most chilling development emerged through interviews with airport staff. Several employees admitted they suspected inconsistencies, strange nighttime movements, odd personnel changes, unfamiliar faces in restricted zones, but they never questioned the director's authority. In an era where airport security relies on layers of oversight, Markham had removed every layer that might challenge her control. And this raised a far heavier question. If a single airport director could rebuild an entire smuggling architecture inside a critical US gateway, how vulnerable were the systems designed to protect Americans from foreign criminal infiltration? The order came at 2:14 a.m., a message transmitted through encrypted federal channels. A command that moved like a shockwave across Michigan. Operation Wolverine Shield is live, and suddenly a state that had been sleeping under the winter sky became the stage of the largest domestic counter-cartel strike since the early 2000s. Within seconds, blacked-out convoys rolled out of staging areas in Detroit, Dearborn, Lansing, and Grand Rapids. Nearly 840 federal agents deployed FBI, DHS, HSI tactical units, aviation security teams, cyber forensics hostage rescue specialists. It looked less like a police operation and more like the opening phase of a wartime mobilization. Helicopters lifted from Selfridge Air Base. Armored vehicles split across highways like dark steel arrows, and all of it traced back to one woman, Evelyn Markham, whose betrayal had triggered a statewide response. The first strike hit Detroit's River Rouge Industrial Zone, an aviation parts warehouse that had been repurposed into a cartel fortress. Breaching charges tore open reinforced doors, sending metal echoing across the district. Flashbangs detonated, flooding the cavernous space with blinding light. Cartel gunmen scrambled between stacked pallets, firing wildly through smoke. Federal teams answered with controlled precision. Shields raised commands, shouted in English and Spanish formations, advancing with military discipline. Minutes later, the firefight collapsed into handcuffs and shouting as the warehouse fell under federal control. But Detroit was only the beginning. In Flint, agents faced a hardened CJNG cell barricaded inside a converted aircraft maintenance hangar. Welding equipment, steel plates, improvised choke points, the location had been engineered to slow federal penetration. When cartel spotters launched drones fitted with jamming modules, communications flickered. For seconds, the operation teetered on the edge of chaos. Then FBI tech teams countered, cutting the interference and clearing the way for DHS armored units to ram through fortified doors. Inside rows of duffel bags, bags stuffed with narcotics identical to the shipments funneled through the airport. The most dramatic confrontation erupted in Grand Rapids. A 3-truck convoy tied to Markham's network attempted to flee as federal units closed in. From above, helicopters tracked the vehicles weaving through darkened roads. On the ground, highway units formed a blockade along the East Beltline. Brakes screamed, engines roared. One driver reached for a rifle beneath a tarp, but agents moved faster, forcing him down as the remaining drivers surrendered, faces pale under the strobe of emergency lights. When dawn approached, Michigan looked as if it had fought a hidden war overnight. 32 targets hit. 67 Cjng operatives captured. 9 corrupted officials detained. Airport employees taken into custody for questioning, and among them Adrian Markham found attempting to erase footage from a warehouse server. News outlets from Reuters to Al Jazeera reported that the scale of the coordinated raid stunned federal observers. Even in the post-9/11 era of heightened aviation vigilance, no U.S. state had ever seen a cartel infiltration reach this depth. President Trump, briefed through the night, declared the operation a full restoration of American security, according to sources cited by BBC and DW. But behind every tactical win lay a darker truth. This was not merely a drug operation. It was the dismantling of an internal occupation, a criminal infrastructure that had woven itself into Michigan's institutions so quietly that most residents never suspected it. And that raised the looming question that federal analysts could no longer ignore. If one state needed a military-scale operation to reclaim its airport, how many others might face the same unseen threat? When the last gunshots faded and the final warehouse doors were forced open, the battlefield shifted. The next phase of the war would not be fought in streets or industrial zones. It would unfold in a sealed FBI cyber forensics lab beneath downtown Detroit. There, under fluorescent light and guarded corridors, agents laid out the trophies of Operation Wolverine Shield hard drives, encrypted phones, laptop servers, memory cards, a digital spine of an empire built in the shadows. Before the sun rose, specialists began pulling apart the data. What surfaced was not chaos or improvisation. It was design, precision, the kind of operational discipline rarely seen outside state-backed intelligence networks. And at the center of that architecture stood Evelyn Markham. The first breakthrough came from a small concealed hard drive discovered behind her filing cabinet. When decrypted, its content stunned investigators. 6 color-coded smuggling corridors, each mapping cargo flows from Detroit Metro Airport into Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. According to Canadian security analysts cited by BBC and The Guardian, these routes matched intelligence signals of rising CJNG activity across Ontario and Quebec. Detroit wasn't the endpoint, it was the launchpad for a northern expansion strategy. More files revealed thousands of disguised aviation consulting invoices. Once decrypted, they mapped directly onto narcotics shipments. Federal accountants traced more than $127 million laundered through shell maintenance companies in Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Grand Rapids. Some payments were funneled through fake charitable organizations, 19 of them, which claimed to fund youth programs, but instead fed accounts in Guadalajara, CJNG's heartland. Then came the most disturbing folder nexus. Inside were 48 profiles of airport staff, quietly recruited, coerced, or bribed into supporting Markham's network baggage handlers, night shift security runway escorts, even 2 TSA contractors. Each profile documented vulnerabilities, debt, family ties, political pressure, immigration fears. According to DW's counterintelligence sources, such targeting methods mirror techniques used by foreign intelligence agencies to turn insiders. Markham wasn't improvising, she was following a method. Adjacent to Nexus sat an encrypted message thread between Markham and a CJNG logistics commander known only as Elvia Harrow. The tone was clear. Markham was not subordinate. She negotiated schedules, demanded compliance, and even threatened to replace a corrupt city inspector who requested a larger cut. She operated with confidence, almost authority. But the most damning discovery emerged from the airport's internal surveillance servers. A forensic reconstruction revealed deliberate blackout windows, brief intervals where cameras went offline under the guise of maintenance. These blackouts matched CJNG flight arrivals down to the minute. In one restored clip, Adrian Markham appeared guiding pallets into a restricted bay while messaging on a phone later linked to cartel communications. His participation was strategic, not incidental. By midday, the digital mosaic was complete. The evidence painted a chilling portrait. Detroit Metro Airport had been converted into a multi-state cross-border smuggling engine tightly integrated into Cjng's continental supply chain. Michigan's aviation infrastructure had been weaponized, from within repurposed into an artery for drugs, money, and influence stretching from the American Midwest to Canada's biggest cities. Federal analysts briefed President Trump, warning that the sophistication mirrored patterns seen in transnational infiltration attempts targeting energy grids ports and shipping hubs. The revelation forced a sobering reassessment of national vulnerability. If a single director could build a system this advanced, what might a coordinated network accomplish in other states? And so the question grew heavier. How much of America's critical infrastructure depends on trust, and what happens when that trust is turned into a weapon? By the time the last encrypted drive was decoded and the final warehouse swept, the scale of the collapse became undeniable. What federal agents dismantled in a few hours had taken Evelyn Markham years to build, and the numbers that emerged told a story more explosive than any raid footage or police briefing. 102 arrests statewide, 67 confirmed Cjng operatives, 9 corrupted officials, 48 airport employees suspended or removed, 4.3 tons of narcotics seized, $138 million in assets frozen across Michigan, Illinois, and Ontario. Each figure represented a fracture in an empire that had quietly burrowed into Michigan's infrastructure. But what stunned investigators and national media most was how seamlessly Markham's model could have expanded. Reuters and DW both reported that files uncovered during the raids referenced planned Cjng expansion into Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania states, with airports considered vulnerable due to leadership gaps or light auditing protocols. Markham's design wasn't isolated. It was intended to be replicated. Detroit was the prototype. Other states were the blueprint. In response, Washington moved fast. President Trump ordered the most aggressive nationwide aviation security review since the months after 9/11. TSA administrators initiated emergency audits across all major airports targeting badge protocols, cargo handling, and employee background checks. DHS issued a directive for corruption screenings focused on aviation customs and shipping hubs. The Guardian noted that several European security agencies praised the rapid response, warning that cartel alliances have increasingly adopted intelligence-style infiltration methods mirroring patterns observed in Mexico, Spain, and parts of Eastern Europe. Michigan's political leadership faced a firestorm. Press conferences erupted across Lansing, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. The governor demanded a federal inquiry, asking how early red flags were overlooked. Airport workers expressed a haunting sense of betrayal. Some had worked beside Markham for over a decade. Many had trusted her judgment, her authority, her integrity. Now they learned she had embedded criminals beside them, manipulated schedules to hide cartel activity, and funneled narcotics through the same corridors they use daily. Local officials scrambled to reassure the public, but reassurance felt thin when placed against the grim numbers of Midwest overdose deaths. Every pound of methamphetamine, every fentanyl pill that passed through Detroit Metro carried real consequences. Broken families lost lives, shattered communities. The drugs seized, 4.3 tons across all categories, represented a staggering volume of destruction prevented at the very last moment. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors unveiled a sweeping list of charges. Evelyn Markham would face conspiracy with a transnational criminal organization, large-scale narcotics trafficking, money laundering, tampering with aviation security systems, corruption, and endangering interstate and international commerce. Her son Adrian faced charges of aiding and abetting drug trafficking, obstruction, and handling prohibited cargo inside a federal aviation zone. Prosecutors noted he acted under direct coordination from his mother. But behind the legal chaos lay a deeper strategic implication. Federal intelligence analysts warned that Markham's operation demonstrated a disturbing vulnerability. U.S. infrastructure could be infiltrated without breaching walls, without crossing borders, simply by corrupting the right officials. The collapse of Markham's network forced America to confront a harsh reality. A foreign cartel had turned one of the nation's busiest airports into a functioning narco hub, and almost no one noticed until the damage reached critical mass. The question now hung over the country like a quiet alarm. If Detroit was the first cartel superhighway built inside the United States, what will America do to ensure it becomes the last? As federal agents finalized the last intelligence briefings in Detroit, a sobering truth spread through Washington: the collapse of Evelyn Markham's empire was not the end of a crisis, it was the beginning of a national reckoning. The United States had just uncovered the first fully operational cartel superhighway built inside its own infrastructure, and it had been engineered not by foreign militants slipping across borders, but by an American official entrusted with the safety of millions. Across major newsrooms, Reuters, BBC, DW, The Guardian analysts drew a chilling parallel. Markham's operation did not resemble cartel improvisation. It resembled strategic penetration, the kind documented in intelligence studies of hostile state actors exploiting soft targets in democratic nations. Aviation hubs, ports, energy nodes, digital systems, places where transparency and public trust form the backbone of operations. Places where corruption, if undetected, becomes a weapon. That weapon had been fired in Michigan, and it hit hard. Operation Wolverine Shield proved the federal government could respond with force, speed, and coordination, but the mere need for such a military-scale mobilization raised questions that America was not yet ready to answer. If one airport director could open the door to Cjng, how many more doors existed nationwide hidden behind bureaucracy, complacency, or underfunded oversight? DHS analysts reviewing Markham's communications uncovered references to phase expansion into Ohio, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Each location targeted airports with gaps in oversight. Each modeled on the same template: recruit insiders, manipulate cargo, launder revenue, exploit trust. Federal counterintelligence specialists warned that the replicability of the system made it more dangerous than any single cartel action. It functioned like malware, not a one-time attack, but a strategy designed to spread. President Trump, in a televised briefing, declared that the Michigan breach represented a direct strike on American sovereignty, announcing new joint task forces between DHS, DoD analysts, and the U.S. intelligence community. Defense News later reported that military logistics specialists were temporarily assigned to assist with national cargo auditing, an extraordinary move not seen since the height of the post-9/11 aviation overhaul. But even as agencies mobilized, the human impact remained at the center of public outcry. Families who lost loved ones to fentanyl overdoses began speaking at town halls, demanding answers, demanding accountability, demanding to know how tons of poison were funneled through a place they associated with vacations, reunions, and daily life. Churches held vigils. Local communities questioned whether corruption had touched other institutions. For many, trust had fractured. And there was another fear, one more difficult to admit. If a cartel could do this, what might a hostile state attempt? Could a foreign intelligence service replicate a structure like Markham's? Could transportation, energy, or cyber networks be compromised from within just as easily? Analysts from Cjng and DW warned that modern power struggles no longer depend solely on armies or missiles, but on who controls the gateways, airports, ports, data centers, supply chains. The battle for sovereignty is now fought in the spaces the public rarely sees. Operation Wolverine Shield had restored Michigan, but the nation understood that security reclaimed in one place meant vulnerability exposed in another. And so the question now echoed across America, haunting in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. If one hidden gateway was discovered by chance, how many more remain buried in the systems Americans trust every day, and who will uncover the next one before it becomes too late? The takedown of Evelyn Markham's criminal empire exposed one of the most devastating breaches of U.S. infrastructure in recent history. What began as a quiet internal audit at Detroit Metro Airport unraveled into the revelation of a fully engineered cartel superhighway designed from within by the airport's own director. Federal agents uncovered encrypted hard drives, $72 million in cash-forged access badges, and a 4-year network of clandestine midnight flights tied directly to Cjng corridors. As Operation Wolverine Shield launched, more than 840 agents executed one of the largest coordinated domestic raids in decades, hitting 32 cartel-linked sites across Michigan. The aftermath was staggering: 102 arrests, 4.3 tons of narcotics seized, and $138 million in assets frozen. Forensic teams later revealed evidence of international routing maps into Canada, insider recruitment files, bribery networks, and systematic camera blackouts engineered to hide shipments. The collapse of Markham's network forced Washington to confront a national vulnerability: the ease with which a foreign cartel infiltrated a critical U.S. transportation hub. Analysts now warn that Detroit may not be an isolated case, but the first uncovered. How many more hidden gateways remain buried inside America's infrastructure, waiting to be exposed?